Hey, it's Fletch. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Welcome to this next episode of Next Generation 911 FutureMakers. The FutureMakers series of podcasts is designed to highlight those special individuals in our industry that are bringing forth not only technology, but the next generation of 911 leaders. Joining me in the podcast studio via Zoom today is Director Tyrell Morris. Tyrell's the Executive Director of the Orleans Parish Communications District down in Louisiana. Thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome, Tyrell.
Hey, good morning. Thank you very much for having me today. It's definitely a pleasure to be with you all, and happy holidays to everyone that's listening.
You know, this was an absolute honor. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, and just chatting beforehand, our lives have actually crisscrossed right next to each other for the past, 15 years or more, but we never bumped into each other, and I just don't know how that didn't happen. But, I've never reminisced so much with somebody I didn't know. But anyway, so you've got a very interesting job down at the Orleans Parish. So first of all, let me clarify for myself and for everybody else who doesn't know, what is a parish?
Yeah, so parish is the vernacular that's used in the state of Louisiana. It's the same as a county. But the term here is parish. So we have 64 parishes in the state of Louisiana. Other states would call it counties.
Okay, gotcha. That's pretty much what I thought it was, but I wanted to get that official. So let me ask you, who puts up the big, huge lighted sign that says, "Hurricanes, please landfall here"?
Well, it seems like this year, 2020 was definitely a year where that sign was lit somewhere. But I will say, the city really demonstrated its ability to be resilient, and the latest improvements made after Hurricane Katrina really helped the city withstand a direct hit of a Category 2 to 3 storm. I will say this year was more active than normal. I've been in New Orleans now for 3 years, and it took 3 years for me to experience a direct landfall hurricane where the eye crossed literally over the 911 center. But I will say I was very proud of how our city responded for our people.
No, that's excellent. So you're kind of from what I've seen, you're a little bit of a technology geek, and you've got a nice center to play around with that's fairly active with emergencies. What have you done down in your center to kind of move you into the next generation of 911?
Well, I think what's important is to realize is that what makes us here in New Orleans unique. We have a population of about 450,000. And so just looking at traditional call volume in a traditional residential community, our call volume should really only be about 200,000 calls. But because the city welcomes and loves and protects and feeds and celebrates with 18 million visitors a year, this agency ultimately we receive over 1 million calls of service a year. And so we have to be very intentional on how our systems help us manage that workload. The other piece of it is that when people, again, 18 million people visit New Orleans. And so when they call 911 or have an emergency, they do not know where they are. They're not familiar with the geography, the topography, our landmarks. And so we really only have technology to help us find where these callers are. And for us, our mission has been redefined. Our mission now is to get the right people to the right place at the right time, better than anyone else in the world. We've simplified that mission on purpose because every decision we make, every technology acquisition we make has to be connected to that mission. And so you're right, we do have a lot of toys here, but I will say they're not new toys. We are just using the best of the industry, bringing it all together, putting it into a plan and executing it when those 3 digits are called.
I've been involved around the public safety industry for a long time. I started out dispatching up in a little town here in New Jersey, and we didn't even have 911 back then. And I used to dream of being able to locate my units around town, or even understand who was calling me and from where. And over the years, that technology finally emerged and was out there. But I think we're dealing with seasoned professionals in this industry that have been doing this for a long time and doing it the hard way. Do you find that they're a little resistant to the new technologies, and are new people coming in kind of forcing that change, and really right down to the policy level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're at a crossroads in the industry. And in my recent NINA keynote address, I said that, the public expectation of 911 is here. The industry needs to catch up. And so not only is the bar here still rising, we're still playing catch up to the public expectation. And so we have a double-edged sword here. The profile of an emergency communications professional has changed dramatically. Where traditionally, with the advent of 911 over 50 years ago, was very clerical in nature, a transporter of information. A call comes in, you put it in a system or write it down, and you repeat it to units that are responding. Now, in that process of managing the call, there's some decision making that's happening now at the communication center. We're determining what unit is appropriate, what kind of unit is appropriate, how many units is appropriate. We're also looking at various points of new data to help us inform that decision. For example, we have this ability to have connected buildings and identify heat temperatures inside of a space. We can look at caller location based upon floor level. We can unlock doors remotely. We can look at cameras remotely. So we've had this long dream of next generation, bringing all the data together into a centralized format. Now it's here. Now the industry has to move and adopt. Okay, now it's here. What do we do with it, and how do we do it?
Yeah, and this has been the problem because that position was basically clerical in nature. I mean, heck, when I was doing it back then, the only computer I had was a big IBM mainframe to do DMV lookups. Everything was written down on cards and punched in and out of a time clock, and then written down in a huge book that we called the blotter, right? By hand. And I mean, oh my God, and typed out. Ridiculous. Now we've got computers to help us make these decisions. We've changed the role of the communications official now into one that's actually got to be a little bit more decision making, and we need the tools. You can't make all these decisions. There's so much data coming in. You can't logically make those decisions. You need not artificial intelligence, but you need artificial assistance. Hey, let me do the maths for you. It's like going to TurboTax or whoever and getting your taxes done. I could add all those numbers up, but I might make a mistake. Why don't I let the machine do it for me and get that busy work out of the way? That's changing the role of the communications official, requiring a much different role, more educated in some respect, but more technological. And how do you account for that?
Well, I think it's also with the evolution of any industry. There is process, there is certification, there's study, there's credentials, and I think that's where we have arrived at 911. Where traditionally we have these communication centers that are subordinate to another public safety agency. Sometimes they're within a police department. Sometimes they're within a fire department. And what we're finding is we're beginning to have these conflicts because I think the best practices have demonstrated that the communication centers serve their community the best when they are independent. Independent meaning that they can truly have the ability to drown themselves in continuing education. And I give the example last week to someone. At some point, a fire department and a police department in some places may have been together under one organization. That no longer makes sense because not that the priorities are competing, but the priorities are provided with equal weight. And for those communication centers that are within a law enforcement driven organization, the communications priorities will never be more than that of law enforcement. And so you will always have this missed opportunity to bring everybody together. Here in New Orleans, we are independent, and we welcome the responsibility of bringing the gatherer of information and some kind of hypothesis or some recommendation to start a particular response. We apply standards, we apply process, we apply best practices to that, we apply accountability to that to make sure that we get it right every single time. Now, we do have to face the fact that this is still a human-driven, emotional-driven industry. So there are going to be some errors. There are going to be some areas where sometimes we miss the mark. But we got to be honest with ourselves about that so we can quickly remedy those and learn from them and move on. And particularly New Orleans, I look at the New Orleans EMS. When it first was created, EMS was part of the police department. Someone said, okay, they've evolved. Let's move them to the health department. Okay, even that. Now they're independent. And so there's a reason for that natural evolution of a profession. I think 911 has that place. And some of the people in the 911 community may not agree with me, but I do believe we're at a place now where the federal government plays a role in helping us shape what this experience looks like as a nation. I'm not saying the federal government needs to grab control of 911. No, 911 works best when it's locally controlled, but we don't yet have someone stepping up to the plate to say, let's define the path forward, provide resources, and let's all move in unison to that path forward. But we have this disjointed approach to next generation 911. We're kind of all racing to the same end result, but we're kind of wasting time and money doing it our own individual way.
Boy, you are a troublemaker. How did we never meet before? I agree with you completely. You know, public safety is grew up in this home rule environment. And we were talking just before we started, you know, back in the days before I was dispatching, I was on my local squad. And the local area hospital, one of them started a paramedic unit. It was one of the first ones in New Jersey called Medic 51 out of Dover. And it was kind of almost the next town over in the next county. It caused so much riff in the local squad. I don't need paramedics coming up here. I'm 5-point certified. I'm an EMT. And it was just, and I sat back and I was 17, 18 years old. I'm like, why are you fighting over delivering better service? And their response times actually improved because now it got to be a race because the paramedics from the next county over were getting on scene before the local volunteers. And I'm like, wow, this is going in the wrong direction. But they wanted to get there so they could cancel the medics.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I started questioning, are you there for the right reason? And you know, as next generation started to roll out and as new technologies started to emerge, there were people in the background that didn't want to see that happen because it changed the financial models of things. So, again, how did we not meet somewhere?
I don't know.
I just don't understand this, Tyrell. So, who was the influencer of you in your career? Where did you turn to for guidance to bring you into this elite position that you've got with 4 stars on your shoulder?
Right. Well, I will tell you, in all honesty, this was not my goal. I left a pretty high-profile job in DC right before I got married, and I came to New Orleans because I wanted to not be the one in the front. So I came to New Orleans as a deputy director of operations here. And at the time, the director of operations was Shinar Haynes, who you may have met also. She's currently the executive director of Tarrant County. So she brought me here as her deputy and the agency has newly consolidated. It was just figuring itself out. And, you know, it was a big lift. But hey, we pushed through. Shinar moved on to Tarrant County, and then we had a newly elected mayor, and she was really looking for some bold leadership to help redefine and really maximize the potential of this organization. She knew that we had the opportunity to do more. We had the ability to really serve our people better if we had support and a leader with a vision. And so when she asked me to take on this role, I said yes. But now I'm all in.
Troublemaker.
As John Lewis told us, we get in good trouble. I think what the mayor saw in me was someone that was honest, someone that was not afraid to take the first step, not afraid to, we know this is going to be a rough journey, and I'll stand guard to protect everybody else as we travel this journey. We know on the other end of this, we're going to win the battle. We're going to win the war. but we're going to come out with some bumps and bruises. And I don't get me wrong, we've had those moments, but my 2.5 years in this role have been incredibly rewarding. I have fallen in love with this city, with this staff, and they have embraced me with such well opening arms. But your question as far as who I turn to for guidance, of course, to my leadership that put me here, but also to my team. I often ask them, I'll sit on the bridge and have a very informal conversation about what they're thinking about life, and I'll give them a look in. Hey, I'm considering this decision. This is where it's weighing on my heart. What do you think? And you'd be surprised how much insight they have, even if it's not a decision directly related to their work, but they know it's a decision that will affect the agency or the mission of the organization or the public safety team as a whole. They provide incredible insight. Also, my husband at home, we often at night when we get home from work, we ask how your day was, and I take that opportunity to share a bit. And I just love the perspective that I get from him. And then, of course, ultimately, I got my mom. So my mom just retired from public service, and so I can always call her and say and run a challenge or an idea. It doesn't always have to be bad stuff, but just things I'm thinking. A pastor, and she gave me some incredible insight. And so I do have that team. One thing I will tell you this, and it's the moment of vulnerability for me, honestly. Leadership can be lonely. Leadership, the higher you go, the lonelier it can be. And I know, just talking from fellow 911 directors, is that when we have our moments by ourselves, in the shower, getting dressed, when there's no one there and we just have ourselves, that's the moment where we really begin to, not say spiral, but we have our most vulnerable thoughts. But to me, I think that's where I have my most growth. And so I say this a lot, that people just need to understand that the leaders are still humans. They need love. They need hugs. They need hey, how's your day? The position itself comes with a little bit of intimidation because it's always the person having to make the tough decision sometimes. And so that may scare some people away from just interacting in general. So just be mindful that your leaders need your energy to make them successful. They need to feel your love. They can't hug people now, but after COVID's over or it goes away, we can get back to that. But it was just a very real moment that I think we don't talk about enough, that we celebrate these public officials that win office, but when they go home, yes, they had their families in love, but the mere weight of the job of itself, no matter how productive or not, has a level of stress, anxiety, trauma that needs to be understood amongst the individuals that are constantly receiving from those people. So it's just my message. And I guess COVID has really helped a lot of us pause in our life. And we're realizing that mental health is more of a priority for leadership than we may imagine. And it's important that we make it okay to say, I'm not okay.
That's a big thing. And PTSD is just rampant in this industry. And even though I had a brief exposure to the industry, and I think I understand it at a level that is higher than most people not in this industry, because I've done the job. It's interesting because you guys have an opportunity right now to educate the public. You're kind of the one of the stars on a new ABC series called Emergency Call. And I got to tell you, I had an incident recently where I was watching another movie where a father and daughter are in their kitchen. The father has a brain aneurysm and the daughter has got to react and call 911, etc. I had a brain aneurysm 11 years ago. And
Wow.
Almost that same situation had played out in my house with my daughter. And I never saw it from her eyes until I watched that show. And then all of a sudden I'm watching Emergency Call, and I'm watching people in your center, and I'm getting these weird feelings. And there was a call taker who took a really bad call, and afterwards, it's just a tight shot of her head, and she goes, whew, just exhales. And that, thinking of that still just gives me shivers. I'm not sure why that's a trigger, but that's a trigger for me. And I called a good friend who Tracy Eldridge. And I'm like, Tracy, I'm feeling all this. And she's like, oh my God, this is classic PTSD. So here I am, 30 years beyond I experienced whatever I experienced, and something totally obscure brings this up. And now a little thing like the TV show that you're on triggers it again with something totally insignificant. A 911 dispatcher exhaling after a really bad call. I don't know why that does what it does, but I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got minimal exposure 30 years ago, and I'm feeling like this. I can only imagine somebody that's done this every day of their life for 10, 15, 20 years and has taken much worse stuff. I mean, you're talking Sussex County, New Jersey. Not much happened up here, right?
Yeah.
You're familiar with that. I mean, you hung out up here. The biggest thing is the cows out on the street in the middle of the night. Night shift is a nice time to get a nice nap. So, and that's just how it was. It's not that way anymore, but that's what it was back then. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I had my series of bad calls and bad experiences, but, it's great to see this new next generation of public safety leader come into play. And that's what really inspired this podcast. It's who's making the next generation of public safety leaders and officials. So what do you do? A long way to get to my point, but what are you doing? Because clearly you've experienced, you recognize the importance. So what are you doing for your people to embrace that new culture?
Yeah, so our philosophy here is we treat people as people first, employees second. So even if the conversation has to be difficult in nature about the work or performance, we still can treat people like humans. And it is never okay to lead with public humiliation. And so we, as I tell the staff all the time, I don't know exactly what you are dealing with outside of these four walls. I can only imagine what home is like for some of you. But the one thing I can commit to doing is make sure this workplace is safe. Call centers traditionally, just by the nature of their setup, can breed some negative energy. They can breed gossip. And in some cases, they can breed bullying. And so I have made it a point to identify those instances and mitigate it or get rid of it as soon as it rears its ugly head. Because if the staff feel as though this is a safe space, that they can be themselves completely, then they perform better. We also have another philosophy we call it's okay to feel. When I got to New Orleans, I immediately identified that those individuals that worked in 911 when it was run by the police department, they kind of adopted that police department mentality that leave my feelings at the door, I'm here to do a job. But what that has translated to is that our staff were sounding like robots. They had no empathy. They were disconnected with the caller. So now once we introduce the idea that it's okay to feel, it's okay to cry, it's okay to be upset about what just happened, but let's manage that emotion as healthy as possible and get your resources. So we have a mental health partnership with a company called Blossoming Minds, where staff can get referred. They can come to the site post-incident. We have a quiet room that's set up with decompression and mental tranquility space. We do aromatherapy. We often do yoga on our front lawn for our staff on their off days. We invite them to bring their families, of course, pre-COVID. So we do like family events where we'll get a blow-up TV screen and a moon bounce and say, hey, bring your kids after school today. We're going to just jump around and blow some steam. So we try to be holistic in our approach to employee health and wellness. Once a year we do a wellness fair here for our employees, and we have masseuse here, or we'll teach them how to make smoothies. And we just try our best to give people the information to make better choices. I'm not going to make the choice for you, but I'm going to inform you so you can make them for yourselves. As far as our recruitment, we have changed the profile of our employee that we want to recruit. We're not looking for someone that can type fast. We can teach that. I'm not, and the same thing with leaders. I'm not looking, in the tagline I use in the leadership recruitment process for supervisors and managers, I'm not looking for good leaders that are good at their fingertips. You can type fast, you can work CAD, great. That does not faze me as far as identifying you as a future leader. I need you to be a leader at your core. I can teach you all the other ancillary stuff. It's like just a basic example of, like, some agencies use a test, right? An entrance test. Now, we use one as well, but it's the least weighted thing on our process. That's really us to identify where we have to support you if you are hired with us in a training environment. And so, but in most agencies, that is the barrier. If you can't pass this test, then you're not going to work here. You potentially lose out on some really, really strong people. We also have these other ridiculous requirements. Some agencies are running credit checks on their 911 call takers. And so when I ask the question, why, the response is, well, it's just what we've always done. Or it's still tied to that law enforcement. It makes sense in law enforcement because there's a risk of bribery there. That's not, I don't think there's a risk of that over in our world. And so we've carried those barriers over, but we're the first people to say, oh my God, I'm short staffed, I can't staff my center. Well, you're turning away really, really good people. And so when we invite those individuals into our space, we love them, we nurture them, we cultivate their skills, they are able to perform well in this new next generation environment. But also we got to be very difficult with the employees on the other side of the equation. We give every employee, legacy employee that's been here more than 20 years, an opportunity to train up, to meet the new standards. We're not going to sacrifice those standards or performance levels that we expect, but we will give them opportunities. And some of them will say, this isn't for me. People can grow with a job, they can outgrow the job, or the job can outgrow them. And it's important that we're very honest with every individual. That's why, to me, performance appraisals are so important. If an employee loses their job for performance and there's a surprise to them, that is a failure of management. No employee should be surprised when you're walking them out of the door, unless they've broken the law or they've done some egregious violation that has brought an incredible amount of liability to the agency. But if they end up losing their job because of performance and they are surprised, that is an absolute failure of management.
How do you manage your public exposure? So you've got TV crews in there, you've got them filming your dispatchers, and to the non-initiated, oh, 911 messed up, this person died. Well, no, hang on, roll it back. 911 did exactly what they were supposed to do. Something in the system failed.
Right.
And 911 is the touch point for the public. So
Yeah.
you failed, when in fact you actually did a good job. How do you handle that to make yourselves look good, to make the public understand better what your job is and what you've got to work with?
Honesty and transparency is so critical there. So the public knows that if we do make a mistake, I'm going to say it. I will go on TV and say, yes, we messed this up and this is what we're going to do to fix it. So then when I come back and say, no, we didn't, they believe me. So it's all about nurturing and maintaining and protecting the public's trust in me as a leader. So when I do speak, they have confidence in what I'm saying. Also, the mayor does a phenomenal job making sure that we have the ability to educate the public on how we do our work. I don't expect people to know how 911 operates. They know they dial the digits, somebody answers the phone, and somebody shows up.
Yep.
But ultimately, the more we know about the process, they understand. They understand the why behind a lot of things. And I'm also in here not throwing, like, for example, if there's a failure or something didn't go so well with one of our public safety agencies, I'm not on TV saying, call them, as get out of my face as their problem. But no, we talk about what's our unified message as a team. We're going to be honest, but we're going to deliver this message so there's a commitment to the public that we've identified this and we're all going to work through this together.
Right. And then you're running
you mentioned the TV crews. I'm sorry, you
No,
mentioned the TV crews. I will say for ABC, they did a phenomenal job to be less disruptive as possible. So pretty much they had the same four consoles. The cameras were stationary and set up, and my people just worked, and they just captured the footage in real time. They weren't in the way. They didn't disrupt any processes. They kind of just set their equipment up to kind of capture as much as possible in real time and let the normal pulse of the organization transpire, and they captured that authentic experience.
how did the call takers that were under the microscope, so to speak, did you have to pick the right person to be there so that you were able to capture a natural environment?
So there definitely was a casting opportunity there. One, we offered people the opportunity. We didn't tell anybody they had to. And then so individuals that that stepped up, we made sure that they were individuals that we were confident would represent the agency well. And because it's not just the agency, but we knew that this show was going to represent the industry as a whole. So there's a responsibility there on us to make sure that the right people were represented to really show the world a true example of what a 911 professional looks like and performs like. They also understood that me as a director, I reviewed every single call before it hit the air. And there hasn't been any that I had to reject, but just the fact that they knew that I had that ability to say no, that they were not going to be embarrassed on national TV, that gave them a level of comfort to kind of let the things happen naturally. But to date, I haven't had to exercise that veto on any of the episodes because I think they really captured the truth of what's happened.
No, that's fantastic because it takes both sides to play in order for that to be successful. And I think that show was very successful because it highlighted the issues that exist in the industry without going way down into the weeds where you're going to turn off the non-techie people.
Right.
Because people don't understand. You know, they know that, hey, if I pick up this device, I can get an Uber, I can get a Domino's pizza. You know, why doesn't 911? Well, 911 doesn't work the same way Uber and Domino's does. And you know what? It's starting to now. Those are new technologies, right?
Yeah.
Again, back into, hey, let's do it a little bit different. Is it safe? Well, yeah, it is actually safe. And it's okay to be right 90% of the time.
Right.
You know, people start engineering for the edge cases. Oh, well, I might not get it right 2 or 3 times.
Right.
Well, does that mean you're going to turn away 97 others where you do get it right and a lot
Right.
better?
Right.
You know, it's an interesting place to be. But again, I think it takes a leader. It takes somebody with a set that will go out in front of the public and take a calculated risk, but have the data to back it up, saying mathematically, this is the right thing to do. This will drive us forward into the end game. And that's why you hired me. Let
Right.
me do my job.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You are spot on. And I think us as government entities, we haven't often been very open to new. We haven't been open to risk to try something new. But I think that is changing. This whole idea of cloud-based 911, cloud-based CAD. 5 years ago, a vendor would not even have gotten an appointment to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But now, I think we understand the value of that flexibility of having things in the cloud, having our data accessible by the good actors in the world, but also the advent of cyber attacks. I think the infrastructure kind of self-crumbled, and I think that the people who their profession is to permeate those networks, they've been successful. So now we have to reimagine. We got to build a new security system for our own data because the bad actors have found ways to get through it. And that is becoming very expensive, very complex, just like the 911 industry has evolved, the cybersecurity industry has evolved. And so when you transition things to the cloud, you really transfer the liability to the experts. And it's okay to tap out and say, we are no longer the experts in cybersecurity keeping our data safe, so I'm going to host it in a cloud where they have thousands of employees whose number one job is to protect my data. Here you go.
You don't tell me how to answer a 911 call, I won't tell you how to store your data, my
Exactly.
data. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? When my car, I can change my oil, I can change my spark plugs, but when I need service, I bring it to the guy who knows what he's doing and that's been certified doing that.
Exactly.
Whatever, man. That's great. Well, this has really been great, and I think, your agency is really a leader in out there, and I don't think you get enough press. I think it's great in the opportunity you've been given with the new show Emergency Call to educate the public, and I'm really really impressed the way that overall show has positioned the industry. Yes, we have problems. Yes, we've got people with problems. But you know what? Most of the time, we do it well and we do it right, and we identify where the problems are and we get it fixed. And, again, it takes people and leaders like you with the attitudes that you have. You know what? A little bit of a troublemaker, but somebody with vision and strategy. And the only reason you're a troublemaker is because you're bucking the system to make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people who I get in trouble with, they also have a respect, because what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
I'm very honest with you about what I feel. I'm very honest with you about what I expect. But I'm also very honest when you perform, and I'm okay to say, well, this conversation has changed my perspective. Thank you. I'm not one that's sitting here saying I can't be swayed one way or the other. Educate me, give me the information. I think I'm pretty smart. I'm able to ultimately bring that together and come up with a recommendation or ending. This is what I think about this scenario. I don't have any allegiance to any individuals or groups on purpose, because my only allegiance is to my staff and to my city. And I think that leads my decision-making process. I mean, even if I have vendors that we have really, really good relationships with for years, if at any point in time that relationship no longer adds value to the mission we do here, then we need to reevaluate this relationship. Yep. Love you, mean it, but it may be time for a change.
Right. And you're making a lot of changes. I mean, we talked briefly, you're setting up examples for businesses in your area because of the problems, right? Multi-story buildings, hotels, because you've got this dynamic environment where your population increases probably more than like a city than Orlando almost, or at least on par. The bulk of your people don't live there. I don't know where I am. I don't know what to do. You're really going forward with some programs to extend next generation capabilities out into the public space.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for taking that risk, and I'm not even going to call it a risk, just taking the bold effort of putting the new world out there and giving it exposure and working with it to see how it benefits everybody.
Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity today. I mean, I love talking about what we do. I love celebrating the industry and my people. But ultimately, I love getting the message out to the public so they know that when you lay down at night, no matter what's happening in your life, when you need us, we'll be there.
Well, the only thing negative is that people are going to go, wait a minute, Tyrell and Fletcher have some history together in the background. That's not good.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we didn't know each other. I think if we had known each other, things might be very different today.
Yeah, definitely.
So from one troublemaker to the next, thank you for what you do. Excellent job. Thank you for sitting down and talking with me. This has been exactly the epitome of what I wanted to accomplish on this podcast series. Thank you for being a next generation 911 future maker and kicking in your talents and capabilities to create that next generation of 911 call taker and leadership that we need to survive moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Next Gen 911 FutureMakers. Thanks so much for joining me today. This is Fletch. I'm the Vice President of Public Safety at 911 Inform. Remember to like and subscribe below and hit that bell to be notified whenever a new FutureMakers podcast is published. Remember, you can subscribe to the audio version of this at www.NG911FutureMakers.com. Once again, this is Fletch. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Fletch911, and you can check out the rest of my blogs and podcasts at www.fletch.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.